Hi, I'm Kelly Olson, a longtime resident of Fort Collins. Celebrating Natural Area's 30th year in Fort Collins is a very significant event for our community and wildlife. In 1992, a very small but committed group of residents sought to expand the city's open space program. That small group advocated for natural areas, collecting signatures to put a natural areas measure on the ballot. It wasn't a popular idea at the time, compared to today, where natural areas and open space measures receive up to 90% approval from the Fort Collins community. The ballot measure in 1992 and in subsequent elections expanded the city's and county's ability to conserve land. Today, the Natural Areas Program has conserved over 55,000 acres for the benefit of wildlife, native plants, view sheds, and the people that support them. For example, at Soapstone Prairie Natural Area, we have introduced the black-footed ferret and the bison. The restoration at Coyote Ridge has benefited many species, including grassland birds and pollinators. Thanks to the Fort Collins City Council, Fort Collins became a certified bird city, which is an amazing accomplishment. The conservation of lands and the work Natural Areas staff is doing directly benefits wildlife. Conserving land benefits us all and will continue to for the next 30 years and beyond. Thank you, Fort Collins voters, and all who have made this possible.
Today I'm at Soapstone Prairie, one of my favorite natural areas in Fort Collins, and I'm just feeling all of the energy that is here today in the beautiful grasslands, and I just need to recenter and reconnect and get some perspective. You know, we're not in this alone, that the animals and plants are doing this life with us. And so I think for me, especially as a person of Indigenous descent here in Colorado, I know that I'm not doing this alone. I'm very connected to the land that we're all a part of. So I would say the biggest gift that we get from being outdoors is just that reconnection when we're having a tough day. I think there's a lot of people that are realizing how access to the outdoors is not equal for everybody. Not everybody has the chance to come get the benefits from being outside. And so I think a lot about how could we make natural areas more accessible to youth of color, to low-income youth. Making sure that every single kid has the opportunity to visit natural areas would be a great goal to have. We forget that important justice element of what natural areas can really do for people, going back to them being therapeutic. For us to reconnect with our own lands as Indigenous people or people of Indigenous descent is probably the most healing thing we can do for ourselves. I believe the land doesn't forget us, even across all of the hundreds of years of ways in which Indigenous people were disconnected, forced out of these areas. And so there are many, many groups that were using this land and still use this land. So really just making an intention to seek the voices that haven't been represented, making sure that we get the full story of the land, because we just have such a partial understanding of everything that happened here. So I know that we're looking back at the last 30 years of the Fort Collins natural areas, and what I really see for the future is a greater inclusion of the voices of our Northern Colorado community, and to really just make sure that when we're communicating about the land, that we're not just speaking from one lens. A statement, I think, for a place like the city of Fort Collins to provide so much intention around conserving the natural areas that surround our city. I think what that teaches other cities and it tells the people who live in Fort Collins is that they're looking out for our best interests. They're looking out for the value that land has. And I think the truth is that These lands have always been working lands. They've always had human involvement, and there's a long history here. So I think part of conserving land is also about conserving stories and ideas and all of the different knowledges that have existed on this land as well.
Well, it's kind of hard to believe that the 30th anniversary of the natural areas is coming up, but it's been fun to reflect on all the changes that have occurred in the natural areas during that time. The natural areas were relatively few and far between. Finally, we now have this really amazing interconnected green belt of natural areas, which allows both nature to thrive and people to thrive along with them and understand how they interconnect. Yeah, my role with the natural area programs has been twofold. Originally it was called the Master Naturalist, and that has evolved now to Volunteer Naturalist. But the goal was to educate people who had an interest in nature so that they could create programs or at least volunteer to talk about programs. And that all interested me as being a former teacher and a biologist and so on. Fortunately, later on, they needed some visual signage to go with the natural areas. And so I was able to use my skills as a graphic artist and an illustrator to create some of the signage. So I've enjoyed both those aspects of my Master Naturalist career. So one of my first signs to do was cattail chorus. It was either the first or one of the very first signs that Sue Kenny, who was kind of the initial head of the Master Naturalist program, wanted me to create. And so we actually came out to the cattail chorus area, took a look at the pond, and of course she had a vision for some of the kind of elements in terms of animals and birds and that she wanted on there. And then it was up to me to kind of put it together. And I can remember working in my basement, creating the painting, because usually I'll use traditional media like acrylics and mixed media and so on. My wife Sharon came down, and I remember saying to her, you know, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I want to be doing. It certainly was an assignment which pleased me a lot and kind of set my career in motion in terms of writing and illustrating natural history projects. One of the things that inspires me in looking at things in nature is to take a peek at things which maybe everybody doesn't take a peek at. And so when I'm looking to create a sign, I like to take an unusual perspective or maybe show the animal doing something that is a little bit unexpected or dramatic in some way, so that that'll come through in the sign. Well, it's always kind of fun to see a design or an image that I've created and actually see it in place. And for a great many of the signs, I get a chance to see a lot of them. For others, I may not come across them until weeks or months later. But it's always a surprise, and it's always fun, and it's good to know that you know, the vision that you had in creating the sign is something that might inspire somebody else to travel more trails as a result. So it's gratifying. The legacy that the natural areas leaves, I think, for the future is amazing, because it was hard initially to convince people that it was a good idea to buy property, for example, so close to Wyoming or in widely scattered areas. But it really was an amazingly good choice, because it combines some of the necessities of finding ways for wildlife to live and thrive in the area along with people. And the taxpayers saw the value in this, and they helped raise the money to make this a possibility. So I think the long-range benefits are going to go well into the future, and it's comforting that some people had a vision to look that far in the future to make that happen.
Today at Soapstone, the city offered this opportunity to learn about Soapstone, to experience the great outdoors, which was fantastic, to meet other people with disabilities, to socialize with them, and also to give feedback on the accessibility of Soapstone.
Accessibility to places like this is really important, just for emotional well-being, for just being inquisitive, learning more about the flora and fauna of our area around. And it's so nice to be able to get out to areas like this and see things that other people are enjoying as well.
What it means for me to be part of the natural areas environment, it is something that's necessary, because everybody wants something beautiful to look at or something fun to do. But the biggest problem is when it's not accessible, how can everybody enjoy it?
The feedback that we got at Soapstone is really great and useful for us. Specifically, I think in the short term, we're going to do some work on tables, signage, and then long term, it's going to help us just build an understanding of how to make sites more accessible and welcoming.
So I thought it was pretty great that your team was brave enough to get in a chair and try and roll up a hill. It's one thing to design for accessibility, it's another thing to try and do it in a wheelchair. And I think it was pretty eye-opening, right? Just the simple things, just the little simple things of trying to get in a van.
That's one thing about you can go on these paths, but then you want to go, what's around the next bend? What else is there that I can't see that other people can see? There are places without a band, from natural areas in Fort Collins to national parks, where you're very limited to where you can go. And other people come back and go, oh, that was so cool, and I wish I could see it.
We want to make natural areas welcoming to all people, no matter how they experience the outdoors. And each of these conversations, like this one at Soapstone, we're hoping that they all build on each other and give us lots of lessons learned and connections with the community so that we can make the outdoors welcoming for everybody.
One of my key lessons after being injured 4 years ago is we need to be able to get outside. We need to have fresh air and open space to be healthy people. It's getting out to an area where I can easily get to a nice view, where I can roll my wheelchair, where I can see the buffalo, see the eagles, see the birds. That's the part that makes me whole. And Fort Collins truly works to give us that. And thank you very much for showing us Soapstone. I love it.